you know, when you have like friends or coworkers or family members or whoever that you want to explain the situation in Palestine to, this is the video that you send them. You send them this video right now, okay? So multiple things have been happening in Palestine, okay? In East Jerusalem, in the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, the Israelis, they've been trying to evict a bunch of Palestinian families that have been living there for decades and decades and decades. And the irony, the sad irony of the issue is that these families were already refugees, right? So in 1948, when they ethnically cleansed Palestine for the first round, yes? So this is called the Nakba, meaning the catastrophe, the disaster in Arabic. You had tons of Palestinians that were exiled, that fled Palestine to neighboring countries like Jordan and Syria. And then you had other Palestinians who were internally displaced. So you have millions of Palestinians still living in Palestine who are second generation, third generation refugees in their own country. And so some of these families living in Sheikh Jarrah, they are just that. They are refugees who were expelled from their homes. They came to East Jerusalem in the 50s. And now the Israelis are once again trying to, expel them from their homes. I mean, the level of brutality, of violence against them, this perpetuated violence is so disgusting, right? So you had people protesting against that naturally. And even right now, right this minute, you have checkpoints around the neighborhood. And of course, guess what? Only the Jewish settlers are allowed to in and out, right? So if you're Palestinian, you want to leave your own house, you can't do that, right? You have to be accompanied by police to your door. I mean, I spoke to Zakaria the other day. It's on the channel. You can go and watch the interview. You know, you're accompanied like a child to your door, right? It's a police, police state is kind of like an understatement. You know, we have to talk about a military occupation. It's what it is. It's de facto a military occupation. So people were protesting that. They were also protesting what's happening in Damascus Gate, because at the start of the holy month of Ramadan, the Israelis, they put a restriction on gatherings, right? Yeah, Palestinians, you're not allowed to assemble here, right? So much for the only democracy in the Middle East, right? They love saying that about Israel, and then you see how they treat Palestinians. So those two protests against what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah, the evictions, and what was happening in Damascus Gate, they kind of became intertwined, right? And so what do the Israelis do? They crack down on the Palestinians, of course, right? They start using tear gas, stun grenades, rubber-coated bullets. And again, I mean, when you compare that to the ethnic cleansing and the bombings, it kind of pales in comparison. But it's just as much an atrocity as anything else, right? And it culminates on May 10th, when the Israelis, they stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Again, Aqsa Mosque, this is the third holiest site in Islam. But they don't care. They just barge right in. They send the police right in. They start firing grenades inside of the mosque. I mean, it's during Ramadan, right? During prayer time. So, I mean, it's astonishing. We talked about this before. I just want to show you again some of the footage, right? Here. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, you get the idea. We have a lot more pictures of that. We've covered this before. I mean, it's quite shocking, right? What they've done to the place. So, of course, in response, what happened is that Hamas, which rules the Gaza Strip, right? So you have the political party, Hamas, and then you have the Qassam Brigade, which is the military wing of Hamas. And so Hamas issued an ultimatum. They said to the Israelis, you get out of Al-Aqsa Mosque, you leave, or there will be repercussions. They will respond with rocket fire. And the Israelis, they didn't listen. They're like, no, we're not going anywhere. And so they responded with rocket fire, right? You have the Hamas firing rockets, and then Israel started bombing the Gaza Strip. For 11 days, they bombed the crap out of it. It's so violent that people thought it was going to be a ground invasion once again, because they had Operation Cast Lead in 2009, they had Operation Protective Edge in 2014. These names, they're synonymous with massacre. That's what it is. Thousands of Palestinians killed. The infrastructure is damaged so badly that it's still destroyed to this day, right? I mean, when we say Gaza is the world's largest open air prison, it's really an understatement. Yeah. So in any case, the Israelis, they started bombing Gaza for 11 days and, doing airstrikes and also by land. Okay, so both by land and by air. And, again, this is unconfirmed, although I would not be surprised because they did this in 2009. I've seen video now of them using white phosphorus. Okay, so again, this is kind of like just because whether they use white phosphorus or not does not mean that they didn't commit any other war crimes. Yes. So what they've been doing, the Israelis, is they've been targeting infrastructure, right? So they've damaged the water system in Gaza so badly that you had sewage and human waste, everything that's in the sewer is coming out, overflowing onto the streets. You had hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who had their water supply cut off because they hit a desalination plant, right, to purify water. They also hit the electricity infrastructure. So, in Gaza, you have about 10 lines that deliver electricity. 6 of them were put out of action. Al-Shifa Hospital is the biggest hospital in Gaza. They bombed the road leading to the hospital, like making it harder for wounded and other people to get there. They also hit clinics belonging to the health ministry in Gaza. They hit clinics belonging to Doctors Without Borders. They even killed one of the most important doctors who works at Al-Shifa Hospital, and they killed him along with 12 other members of his extended family, right? Can you imagine? The guy's sitting in his home, and they just wiped out the entire family. And it's not the only one. There are several other families who have been completely wiped off the civil registry. They're gone. They vanished from existence in the blink of an eye. Several families. Right? And then Israel, of course, says that they're only targeting Hamas. Half the casualties are women and children. Right? And again, what does that? Does that mean the rest of them, they're all necessarily Hamas? No. They're men. Doesn't necessarily mean they're Hamas. But just to give you an idea, right? So in 2014, 65% of the casualties were civilians. 65%, right? So that's over 1,200. And now, this time, about half of the 240 plus, again, the figures keep rising, but it's roughly around 240. Half of them are women and children. So, it really begs the question, all this advanced military equipment, the $3.8 billion a year that Israel receives in military aid, what are they doing with that? They love to boast that they have one of the most advanced militaries in the world. And it's true, they do, right? They have some of the most advanced equipment. So, do they not know where they're dropping the bombs? I'm pretty sure they know where they're dropping the bombs. In 2018, when they were shooting Palestinian protesters in the knees and bragging about it, they said, the IDF on Twitter, they even said, we know where every bullet landed. That's what they said. They know exactly where this stuff is landing. They're not stupid. They even knew that in the Al Jazeera and Associated Press offices, which they also bombed with this 12-story building, they knew there's no Hamas in there. Right? There was no one in the building. It was evacuated. And you had video of them pleading on the phone, like, please do not bomb it. Let some of our journalists go in and take some stuff. And no, they don't care. They're bombing it. The whole building is gone, right? And of course, so the point here is that they're not killing Hamas, even though they say they are. And again, it's like they want to call resistance fighters terrorists. Because anyone who resists Israel is either a terrorist or an anti-Semite, right? You're either one of the two, or maybe both of them, right? There's no anything is forbidden. These are the confines of discourse that are allowed about Israel, and so they've massacred I think 60 plus children, around 66 children, again dozens of women. So the people killed have nothing to do with Hamas. You have 2,000 Palestinians that are wounded. You have the health infrastructure, water infrastructure, electricity infrastructure decimated. Who are they kidding? Honestly, who are they kidding? And they go and brag about this on Twitter, right? They make nice little infographics. Look, 200 terrorists neutralized. No, those were not terrorists. Half of them were women and children. But of course, the West doesn't care, right? What does the West do? They come and support them. So, in Austria, you had the Chancellor, Sebastian Kurz. He goes and raises an Israeli flag over the chancellery. It's like a dick measuring contest. Who can support Israel the hardest, right? And then you had in the Czech Republic, they were raising an Israeli flag over Prague Castle, right? And of course, the Americans in the UN Security Council, what do they go and do? they block a statement condemning Israel. Well, the statement wasn't meant just to condemn Israel. It was calling for a ceasefire. And in the text, in the language, you had language condemning Israel. And so that was a no-go, right? You're not allowed to condemn Israel. That doesn't work. Bad doggy. You can't do that. So 3 times, I think it's at least 3 times, they blocked, the United States stepped in and blocked this call for a ceasefire, right? Again, people need to understand, like, we're in 2021. The military aid from the U.S., yes, it's very important. No, they're not going to say no to it. But one of the main reasons that they need the U.S. Is because of the permanent seat on the UN Security Council, right? And of course, it's like I said the other day when I was on with Margaret and Danny on Black Agenda Report, when we were talking about this. You know, Israel has 3 permanent seats on the UN Security Council. They have France, UK, and the US who cover for them. But even here, you had everyone in favor of this call for a ceasefire except the US, right? So the point here is that all these Western countries, they just, you know, they're groveling over Israel, trying to cover for them. It's like, oh, if you criticize them, you're anti-Semitic, and Israel has the right to defend itself, right? It's this diarrhea we keep hearing every time. Israel has the right to defend itself, but not Palestinians, because Palestinians are not humans according to them, so they don't have the right to self-defense. Yes, it's in their language. It's not hidden. They're just saying it to you in plain sight. You just have to listen. Right? So Israelis have the right to defend themselves, but not Palestinians. Right? Israel has a right to security, but not Palestinians. Right? So, you know, it culminates in a ceasefire, right? So Egypt brokered a ceasefire. This is on, I think it was Friday, May 21st. In any case, it was May 21st at 2 a.m. local time. That's when it kicked in. But until the last minute before the ceasefire kicked in, you had Israel still bombing targets, right? They got to get that little bit of bloodlust out there. So, you know, they had the ceasefire come into effect, and it's held since then. It's largely held. But, you know, hold on, I just want to show you one tweet before we move on to the next point. Just this is from Netanyahu on Twitter, right? He puts a bunch of emojis from all the countries that have been cucked by the Israeli lobby. So, you know, thank you for resolutely standing with the Zionist occupation and supporting our right to self-defense against terrorist attacks. Yeah, okay. So these are all the cucked nations, okay? Yes, it's a shame. It's a shame indeed. They've lost their sovereignty and brains. So, you know, they have the ceasefire kick in, and I swear to God, like, the next day after the ceasefire, I read a headline that Israel has stormed the Aqsa Mosque. And my first reaction, my instinct was that, oh, this is an old article. This is from 12 days ago, right? No. No. They went back to the compound. They went back to the mosque. Like they learned nothing, right? A war was started over this. And they go back in and do it again to provoke the Palestinians. I mean, this is so obviously an attempt to kind of push Hamas into violating the ceasefire, right? So, here, let me show you this. I mean, really, the stones, right? The stones, honestly. Right, it's like they've learned nothing, and they're just trying to provoke them again. And of course, they've launched this thing called Operation Law and Order. So they've been doing these mass arrests, right? So instead of actually getting the message that, you know, Palestinians do not want to be treated like subhuman, you know, Palestinians don't want to be evicted from their homes. Palestinians want to live with dignity on their own land. It's their land. It's their country. No. What do the Israelis do? They double down. So they go back to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They keep on maintaining these checkpoints around Sheikh Jarrah and doing these mass arrests, right? So, oh, you want to protest? Okay, we're going to come arrest you. So you have thousands of people arrested. They're even raiding their homes, right? Because that's what the only democracy in the Middle East would do, right? You would go and raid the homes of people who protest. It's very democratic. Yes? So, I mean, it's really, they get away with murder, literally. They really get away with murder. Incredible. at least some countries have a spine. We have to admit that some countries have a spine. I point to the Maldives. So Maldives has suspended all ties with Israel to show solidarity to Palestinians, right? We also have Ireland, the Irish, right? Ireland condemns de facto annexation of Palestinian land by Israel. Okay, so they passed a motion in the parliament in Ireland recognizing the settlements, the illegal settlements, as a de facto annexation. And, it's astonishing that we kind of have to look at this as a unique thing, right? That there are not more countries who follow this example. And again, when we talk about annexation on the part of Israel, here we're saying de facto, but in many regards, they're official. For example, they took the Syrian Golan Heights in 1967, which they're still illegally occupying. They annexed it in 1980, right? And they also passed this basic law, or it's also called the Jerusalem Law, I think also in 80, 81, where they recognized, they bestowed upon themselves that Jerusalem is the unequivocal capital of the Jewish state, and that it's theirs essentially. So they don't care about international law. They don't give a crap. And they've just straight up annexed, like openly, not just with the settlements in the West Bank and so forth, but there are things like Jerusalem, like the Syrian Golan Heights. They're just like straight up annexed, like, no, this is ours. And again, just to give you an idea how illegal that is, when the UN Security Council passed resolutions condemning them, and not just condemning them, but declaring them null and void. So saying that, yeah, you may be passing this law, but it doesn't mean anything. Even the United States voted in favor of that. It was unanimous, right? So right off the top of my head, I have UN 242, Resolution 242. That's what they need to withdraw from the captured territories. There are many, many more, right? I lose track. There are a lot of resolutions telling Israel that its annexations and all this is illegal. So that just to give you an idea how, and of course, afterwards you have Dominic Raab, who's the British Foreign Secretary, and you have U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. They're going and doing like a victory lap. They go and visit Netanyahu. It's like they're going to visit their masters, because they're so cucked. So they have to go and pay tribute to their masters. They pat them on the head and say, thank you for defending us, right? Thank you for covering for our war crimes, our ethnic cleansing. Yeah, and it's nothing surprising. I mean, we're not surprised by this at all, right? The UK essentially created Israel. The United States continues to subsidize it, but it's all of these Western countries in general, and of course, unfortunately, some Arab countries. And they've been trying to do this thing. I think, So I interviewed Max Blumenthal. He wrote an article about it in the Gray Zone, and they're doing this thing where they're trying to say what's happening in Palestine is bad, but we also need to condemn the rise in anti-Semitism. What do those two things have to do with each other? Like, they're trying to mix this in, right? They're trying to mix it in and make it look like people who oppose or support Palestine, like a big chunk of them happen to be anti-Semites. This is preposterous. This has nothing to do with the conversation. They're purposely trying to smear. They're trying to obfuscate what's happening. And again, Palestinians, in case you didn't know, are also Semites. Yes, Arabs, we are Semites as well. We speak a Semitic language. We are from this area. We are Semites, whether you like it or not. So, this is ridiculous to try and conflate the pro-Palestinian voices and movements with anti-Semitism. This is preposterous. Of course, you have some people who are really ignorant and racist, and who are anti-Semitic, but that's nothing to do with what we're talking about here. When we say that Palestinians want to have a state, they want to have their own land back, they want to live in dignity without being bombed by Israel. This has nothing to do with that, but they're trying purposely to mix this in and make it look like it's part of the pro-Palestinian movement, which is preposterous. And even Israel, they're trying to make this about Hamas. Hamas was founded in the 1980s, right? The Palestinian issue is much older than the 1980s, in case you didn't know. Yes? So this has nothing to do with Hamas. And as a matter of fact, they wanted Hamas to win. They've wanted this very much because they've been able to divide the Palestinians, of course, right? To sow to sow dissent and distrust between them, and also on the world stage in the media, they can, oh, you see these Islamists, oh, you see these terrorists, oh, we're in the right and we were going to go and bomb Palestinians with impunity, right? It's a great alibi for them to continue their bloodbath and their occupation and their siege on Gaza. So this has nothing to do with that, right? And the Israelis, Netanyahu is claiming that, this 11-day onslaught, he managed to weaken Hamas. This is ridiculous. Hamas is probably at their strongest point ever, because now they've made, they've managed to strengthen their ties with Palestinians in Jerusalem, right? Because the whole point was that they were taking a stance, not for something in Gaza, but for Jerusalem, right? So that's actually strengthened their image in Palestine and with Palestinians and worldwide as well. I think there's been a real shift in public opinion. Again, I hope this is not just an illusion, but I genuinely feel there's been some shift in public opinion. I feel that more people have become sympathetic. And again, I talked about this with Max on my show on Press TV, so you go watch the episode. It's out today. That you have protests now in places like Florida and Kansas, places you would have never even thought would see pro-Palestinian marches. So that's very good. And you had 100,000 people out in the streets of London. That's big, man. If I'm not mistaken, those are the biggest protests since before the Iraq War. So it's nice, it's good, and keep that up, right? So we need to keep that up, keep up the pressure, because just because this 11-day attack is finished, it doesn't mean that the occupation is finished in Gaza, that the plans to evict people in Sheikh Jarrah are finished. As you can see, they're still mass arresting people in Jerusalem. They're still desecrating the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They have no respect for anyone else, right? If you're not Jewish, fuck you. They will come and shit on you. So, we need to keep the pressure up. We need to keep exposing Israel for what it is. It's a settler colonialist project. It's not a country. It's not some fucking victim. You can't receive billions of dollars in military aid from the U.S. and have a Navy and an Air Force and, some of the most advanced military equipment in the world, drones, and then attack a civilian population and pretend that you are the victim. I don't tolerate this nonsense, right? The oppressors are the Israelis. The oppressed are the Palestinians. It is that simple, People try to complicate this issue. They try to make it bigger than it is in the sense that, oh, it's too complex to understand and it can never be resolved. And you have these idiots like Cenk Uygur saying that they're fighting over which sky god. This has nothing to do with religion. That is insanely embarrassing, right? He talks like a child. I think outside Democratic and Republican Party politics, he doesn't know his ass from his elbow. So, this is extremely insulting, and it's not even like an oversimplification. It's literally nothing to do with what's happening, right? So there you go. And it's just heartbreaking, right? This what just happened in Palestine now, what just happened in Gaza, this 11-day attack, it's the worst since 2014, right? And in 2014, they even beat what they did in 2009. I mean, yes, the death toll is lower, but you need to understand something, man. Gaza is under siege from Israel and Egypt. Israel controls everything that goes in. The Palestinians cannot leave Gaza. They're trapped. They're still living in rubble. They're still living in the destruction of the last war. And now it's just added to that, You have so many homes that have been destroyed, so many people that have been displaced. There are no schools are open now, right? All the schools are closed because they have to use them as shelters. And as we've seen in 2014, even when people use UN schools as shelters, Israel just fucking bombs them, right? They kill 200 people in one go. It doesn't matter. So, it doesn't matter that these Western governments are continuing to cover for Israel. I think most people are starting to wake up to see what Israel is. Again, it's very important to underline, it's not just about their war crimes. We need to look at the very nature of what Israel is. Then you will understand what is happening there. It's a colonialist settler project, right? The whole point is to ethnically cleanse Palestine to make way for Jewish settlers from all over the world, right? You have people with dual nationalities who have like 2 fucking homes. Meanwhile, Palestinians don't even have one. They don't even have one nationality, right? Or at least as in terms of a passport. They cannot even travel. They're living under a brutal military occupation. So this is easily one of the biggest atrocities of the last century, of this century, right? What's happening there. Never forget that. This is something else that I'll add into the segment about Palestine is that, Hamas, they're at an extremely strong point now, and that's thanks to Iran. You know, they were able to fire, I think, 4,000 rockets at a much higher rate. You know, much bigger volume, much longer range, up to 250 kilometers. And, you know, this is thanks to support from Iran, because Iran, since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, a core pillar of that has been supporting the liberation of Palestine. And, you know, when it comes to the Yemenis, I also saw a video of, you know, Yemeni people, like, from their rings down to their bullets, just donating everything to send money to Palestinians now. Think about that, because, you know, how little the Yemenis have. They've been under this brutal genocide from the Saudis since 2015. I mean, think of the conditions that they're living in. And even despite that, they go and help the Palestinians. And the same with Iranians, right? Iran is under also crippling sanctions, and they still go and help Syria. They still go and help Venezuela. They still go and help Palestine, right? So, you know, this is, it's very important to have solidarity. And this is why the resistance, it can't be defeated, man, because, you know, we're people in Iran, people in Syria and Yemen and Iraq and Lebanon, Venezuela, Cuba, you know, we're all fighting for our sovereignty, for our land. We know the value of this land, right? Palestinians know the value of their land. They have no illusions about this. It's existential for them. It's life and death. And you can never buy that. You cannot get rid of that. You cannot, you know, you cannot kill that. I hope that, you know, in our lifetime, we'll see Palestine free. But I can tell you one thing is for sure, especially when Western governments refuse to do anything. I mean, which is logical. They helped create Israel, right? But when the government, on the government level, they refuse to do anything. I mean, what else do we have except doing it on, you know, the popular level, on the level of the public? So when I see 100,000 people out on the streets in London, I love that. I commend that. I encourage that. I support that. This kind of direct action, you know, also what they're doing with Elbit, this weapons manufacturer. This is what I want to see. And of course, not just with the Palestinian issue, but especially because it's one of the biggest atrocities happening. So this is something that must be sustained. It's great seeing people come out to protest, but you have to keep it up. Right? It has to be sustained. It has to be continuous, right? If right now I make a video about Palestine and I make just one video, that doesn't accomplish anything, right? It has to be a sustained effort, a continuous effort of education, of raising awareness, of lobbying, of, you know, pushing from down on up. So this is very important that we all do our bit, and it has to be a sustained effort, a continuous effort.